In a cave near the Dead Sea, archaeologists found a scroll with a story told from the perspective of a giant. The giant has a name: Ohya. He has nightmares, prophetic dreams about a flood that will destroy everything. He sends a messenger to find a prophet named Enoch, to ask if there's any way to survive. There isn't. This scroll, the Book of Giants, was buried in a jar for over 2,000 years. And it answers a question that 4 verses in your Bible refuse to. The most read book in history. The least understood. Open your Bible. Genesis. Chapter 6. Right before the flood. Before Noah. Before the ark. 4 verses. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. And then, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. 4 verses. Then silence. Genesis moves straight to Noah. Now, if you grew up in church, you were probably told the sons of God means the descendants of Seth, the good family line that married into Cain's bad family line. But go to the Hebrew. The phrase is bene Elohim, and it appears in exactly 4 other places in the Old Testament. Job chapter 1, verse 6, the bene Elohim came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Job chapter 38, verse 7, when the morning stars sang together and all the bene Elohim shouted for joy. Psalm 82, God stands in the divine assembly, he renders judgment among the bene Elohim. Every single time, the phrase means divine beings. Supernatural members of God's council. Never humans. Never the sons of Seth. The oldest translation of the Bible, the Greek Septuagint, from the 3rd century BC, translated it as angels of God. And the word Nephilim? For competing theories. No consensus. It might come from the Hebrew naphal, to fall. The fallen ones. Or from Aramaic naphala, giant. The King James Bible chose giants in 1611. Every modern translation since has given up and just left the Hebrew word there. Untranslated. Because nobody knows what to do with it. There's only one other place in the entire Bible where this word appears. Numbers chapter 13. The spies returned from Canaan and report, we saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. But notice, the text tells us this was a bad report. Fear talking. Exaggeration. So were the Nephilim real? And Genesis 6 verse 4 says they were on the earth in those days and also afterward. After the flood? 4 verses. 3 terms nobody can translate. And a story that reads like someone ripped out every page except the headline. So here's the part they don't teach in Sunday school. For 500 years after Genesis was written, every single Jewish reader understood bene Elohim the same way. Angels. Divine beings who crossed the boundary between heaven and earth. Took human wives. Produced offspring that were something other. This wasn't controversial. This wasn't fringe. This was the reading. The Book of Enoch, the most popular Jewish text outside the Bible, told the full story. The Book of Jubilees confirmed it. The Dead Sea Scrolls community at Qumran built an entire theology around it. Josephus, the Jewish historian, wrote about it for Roman audiences. Even the New Testament assumes it. Open the book of Jude. Verse 6. The angels who did not keep their position of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. 2 Peter, chapter 2, verse 4, God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus. Stop. Tartarus. That's not a Hebrew word. That's not even a biblical word. Tartarus is from Greek mythology, the prison beneath Hades where the Titans were locked away after their war against the gods. and Peter uses it to describe where God sent the fallen angels. The New Testament is describing the same event as Genesis 6, using Greek mythology's vocabulary to do it. For 500 years, this was the only reading. Then, around 220 CE, a Christian writer named Julius Africanus proposed something new. Maybe sons of God just meant the descendants of Seth. 2 centuries later, Augustine of Hippo made it the standard interpretation in Western Christianity. And it has been ever since. But here's the detail that changes everything. Augustine was reading a Latin Bible. He was not an expert in Hebrew. And his objection wasn't textual, it was philosophical. He'd absorbed Neoplatonic philosophy, which taught that spiritual beings are purely immaterial. They can't have physical bodies. They certainly can't reproduce. The most common explanation you've heard for Genesis 6 was invented by a man reading the wrong language, solving a Greek philosophical problem, 500 years after the text was written. Now let's open the evidence locker. 1947, Qumran. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the hundreds of scrolls pulled from those caves, researchers found 11 copies of the Book of Enoch. 11. That's more copies than most books of the Bible. Whatever this text was, the community at Qumran considered it essential. But they also found something else. Something almost nobody talks about. The Book of Giants. Fragments labeled 4Q530, 4Q531, 4Q203. Written in Aramaic. Dating to the 1st or 2nd century BCE. And unlike the Book of Enoch, which tells the story from God's perspective, the Book of Giants tells it from theirs. The Nephilim. By name. A giant named Ohya has prophetic nightmares. He sees a garden, all of it submerged in water. He sees a tablet with the names of everyone who will be destroyed. His own name is on it. Another giant, Mahaway, is sent to find the prophet Enoch and ask if there's any way to escape. There isn't. And here's the detail that connects everything. One fragment, 4Q530, mentions Gilgamesh. By name. The same Gilgamesh from the oldest flood story on Earth. The same story that George Smith found on a clay tablet in the British Museum, the one we talked about in our last video. The Nephilim tradition and the Mesopotamian flood tradition aren't separate stories. They're connected at the source. And it goes deeper. Mesopotamian tradition has the Apkallu, divine sages who existed before the flood. They descended from the heavens. They taught humanity forbidden arts, metalworking, medicine, astronomy, writing. And they were punished for crossing the boundary between the divine and human worlds. Sound familiar? Now, did giants actually exist? The internet says yes. The internet is lying. Those photos of enormous skeletons being excavated by archaeologists? They're from a 2004 Photoshop contest on a website called Worth 1000. A digital art competition. The winner was so convincing that 20 years later, people still share the images as evidence of a biblical cover-up. The Cardiff Giant, a 10-foot stone figure discovered in New York in 1869? A gypsum statue carved by an atheist named George Hall to mock people who took Genesis literally. But here is what's real. At Tel es-Safi, the archaeological site of biblical Gath, Goliath's hometown, researchers found a potsherd dating to around 950 BCE. Inscribed on it, in Proto-Canaanite script, are 2 names linguistically related to Goliath. The right name. The right place. The right century. And the Dead Sea Scrolls contain a version of 1 Samuel that gives Goliath's height as 4 cubits and a span. That's about 6'9". Not 9'9", as the later Hebrew text says. Still enormously tall for the ancient world, the average man in the Near East stood about 5'5". But human. Terrifyingly human. The ancients didn't need Goliath to be supernatural to be afraid of him. 6'9" was enough. so after 3,000 years, we still don't know what the word Nephilim means. We don't know why Genesis mentions them in 4 verses and then goes silent. We don't know who changed Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, where the Dead Sea Scrolls say sons of God and your Bible now says sons of Israel. Someone edited the text. We don't know when. We don't know why. And we don't know why the most detailed version of this story, the one everyone in Jesus' time was reading, was eventually removed from your Bible. That version is called the Book of Enoch. 200 angels, called the Watchers, make a pact on a mountaintop. They descend. They take human wives. They teach forbidden knowledge, weapons, sorcery, the secrets of heaven. Their children are the Nephilim. And when the earth itself cries out from the corruption, God's response is the flood. This book was quoted in your New Testament, found in 11 copies at Qumran, preserved for 2,000 years by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and then erased from Western Christianity. What was in it that they couldn't keep? That's the next chapter. The most read book in history. The least understood. If you want to uncover what's hidden in the next chapter, subscribe.